Okay, this video is called What is the Wisdom Behavior Matrix of Cipolla? So Carlos Cipolla wrote what was called stupidity theory, and it loosely could be applied to making this matrix here. And then I've sort of taken his matrix idea and I've added to it what I think is relevant. Okay, so basically, first category is people who are basically chumps, and this is basically most Americans. They live in a way that is sort of lose-win. They are ignorant and passive, and they basically get ripped off all the time. Okay, they're very helpless, and they trust authority. Like if some big pharma expert comes on and says we have a great medication for treatment of hypertension, these guys are 99 or more than 99% of Americans go, oh, sure, a new wonderful medication. I'd be happy to take it. And so they always get ripped off. They're sick. They're kind of pathetic. I feel sorry for them. Okay? I try to help them. All right, now these are the pros, the harmless good pros who mean well, they're kind, they're nice, they try to live a good, decent life, but they're lazy, they don't read, and they're a bunch of ignoramuses, and they only go to conventional news sites where there's essentially zero information except for a coordinated pile of BS to keep them in the chump category. Okay, so you could also call them the stupid but nice, okay, the ignorant but passive is a keyword. Okay, now here's the next category. And this is what Cipolla is most famous for. He calls them the ignorant and the aggressive. These are people who you want to avoid them because they're just a disaster. They not only lose and ruin their own life, they lose in terms of they make other people lose. These might be like a street criminal, somebody who just drags you into BS, drags you into trouble. You can't really predict how they're going to behave. This is also I know people like this who are doctors and PhDs. They're basically sort of like half educated, if you will. They know they've got some type of certification or degree, but there's also something called a cluster B personality. Somebody who's hyper reactive and overreacts to situations, turns mountains into molehills. This could be people who are violent for no reason. Anyways, you can't win with people like this. All you can do is avoid them. And they're actually dangerous in addition in the way that they're kind of unpredictable because they're stupid and they do things that don't really make sense. You can't predict what they're going to do. All you can do is avoid them. They're hopeless, okay? And there's a significant number of people that are this way. Not only ignorant, but also aggressive, nasty, mean-spirited, resentful. So you just have to avoid them. You can't polish a turd, okay? They're never going to change. All right. The next category is the ones that tend to control the world. This is like the big corporations, like big pharma, okay? Like the way that, public education is controlled now. They're smart and wise. They know exactly what they're doing, but they're evil, okay? They're atheists. They don't believe in any of this created an image of God stuff. As far as they're concerned, most Americans are a bunch of chumps and they deserve to be slaves, okay? They want you to be a slave. These stupid people in this category, which is most Americans, they sort of have this benign attitude. They think everything is okay. They think that the system cares about them. No, I mean, why does the system poison your food, poison your health care, and so many other things? Because they don't care about you. They hate you. You're just a stupid-ass farm animal, and they want to make money off you. You need to understand that, or you can't think intelligently, okay? Okay, so these big corporations, the way they run the game, they win, they take your money, and you lose. You can go screw yourself as far as they are concerned. They feel that chumps deserve to be crushed, okay? And this includes, college professors who lie to students about history, who lie to students about biology. For example, the entire teaching of atheism is like a psyop of communism to just bring back slavery. They want to bring back slavery. As far as they're concerned, all these stupid people are just overpopulating the world and they are wasting the resources of the world. Wouldn't the world be a better place if the population was smaller? And that's where things like, MAID come from, medical assistance in dying, okay? They want to try to get as many of you guys to commit suicide as possible because as far as they're concerned, that's better for the world. You're going to be one less person to pollute the world, all right? So what I'm trying to say is if you want to be an intelligent person, you need to be wise to the things that big corporations do, in these public colleges and stuff. And the reason they teach atheism is to deny that you are created in the image of God. Trust me, they don't know what they're talking about. I majored in biology, evolutionary biology at Stanford. I was an A-plus student. I've read about 50 books on the subject subsequent to that. I can tell you, no one knows. There is no biological explanation for the origin of life. It is so far beyond anything that can be explained, it's not even funny. The wisest assumption is just to say it must be God because it's too complicated. I mean, this is pretty obvious, okay? If you go to the beach and you see your name written in the sand, you know that an intelligent person wrote your name. Somebody who knows language, knows how to write, knows how to spell, and wants to actually communicate a message. Perhaps you, perhaps that's their name as well. Okay, it didn't happen by accident. The waves did not create your name in the sand, all right? On the other hand, look at the DNA code. There's 3.3 billion, B as in billion base pairs. Okay, and so now you're going to tell me that just randomly happened? You know, the most complicated code ever written in the history of the world, 3.3 billion. Okay, and that's just a spontaneous, random coincidence of a little lightning rinsing through a bowl of water, swamp water? That's bullshit, okay? All right, so anyways, the way the corporation works is they try to condition you to accept the fact you're just supposed to be poor. Just like all this stuff coming out, oh, you can't have a gas stove. Oh, you should drive an electric car that can be turned off and controlled externally. All this BS, all right? And also, I would say people who know better and teach the nonsense of the keto, paleo, carnivore diet, which plugs up people's artery and makes them sick, I think they're evil, okay? Don't get me wrong. Some of them do it just because they're young, they're naive, they're ignorant, they're kind of stupid, they haven't studied enough, they don't know better. That's a lot of them. But there are also people who promote this stuff, and they know it's bad because they're getting payoffs from corporation, okay? All right, so now what's the last category? The last category is the one I think you want to try to be in, okay? These are the persons who are wise, and they're also morally good, and they tend to follow what I would call Bible ethics. When I say Bible ethics, what I'm talking about is they believe that man is created in the image of God, that every person deserves, to be considered, part divine as well. Sure, we're part beast, but we're also part divine, and they deserve the benefit of the doubt, okay? So they try to help other peoples. And I'm going to just share with you real quick a few of these quotes from the Bible. Here is Genesis 1:27. So that means Genesis 1st chapter, verse 27. So God created man in his own image. In the image of God, he created him. Male and female, he created them. And God blessed them. And God said to them, be fruitful and multiply. Okay? So it's kind of interesting that Genesis is exactly the opposite of the evil corporation atheist position. And, some people try to say, oh, atheists are nice. No, they're not. I've got a lot of experience with atheists. The entire Soviet communist system is based on atheism, as is communist everywhere. Atheism gives you permission to kill and hurt people. That is why it is promoted by communist groups, okay? That's the purpose of it. There is no biological reason for it. And I've seen so many bad things from atheists. Drug addicts, criminals, you name it. It gives them an excuse to do all their evil. All right. The next thing is from Genesis 1:29 about learning the vegan diet and teaching it. So we're meant to be vegans here by our physiology, but also here it comes from the Bible. Genesis chapter 1, verse 29. Behold, I have given you every plant yielding seed which is upon the face of all the earth, and every tree with seed in its fruit, and you shall have them for food. Okay, another thing is people will try to tell you, oh, the Bible's stupid, the Bible's fake, it doesn't matter. Let me tell you something. Here's like the greatest wisdom you could have, and it comes right from the first chapter of the Bible. Man is created in the image of God, and you should eat a vegan diet. I mean, how much more valuable wisdom can you get than that? Okay? All right. And so there's all these lightweights, and the smartest people that ever lived, tended to be religious. Look at Isaac Newton. He was a total Bible nut, okay? So let's go to some of these other ones. Also, a person who's wise, they trust in God. They don't trust in man's authority. Ever since the beginning of time, man's authority has been evil, tyrannical. Almost all places since the beginning of time have been slave labor, okay? If you're somebody who thinks you could be atheist, Zen, Buddhist or something and not bring back slavery, you are kidding yourself. You have to have something that can stand up to atheist communism, Darwinism, which basically says whoever has the power can make everyone else do whatever they want. Okay, that's what that's all about. Whereas Christianity, Bible-based ethics, says man is created in the image of God and therefore entitled to natural rights. And that's like what our founding fathers said. Okay, so now let me share with you something from This next one is actually from John, the Gospel according to John, chapter 15, verse 4. He said, "Abide in me as I in you." Well, first of all, it starts out, this is Jesus Christus speaking. "I am the true vine, and my Father is the vine dresser." Then later on it says, "Abide in me, and I in you. As the branch cannot bear fruit by itself unless it abides in the vine, neither can you unless you abide in me. I am the vine, and you are the branches. He who abides in me, and I in him, he it is that bears much fruit. For apart from me, you can do nothing. Apart from me, you can do nothing." Okay, and he says, "By this my Father is glorified, and you shall bear much fruit." So what am I getting at with that? What I'm getting at is I've noticed that Christianity is unbelievable in its ability to generate beautiful, creative work. Okay, it has generated the best architecture. Look at all the cathedrals, the most beautiful buildings ever made. Back since the 1200s and on, by people who had almost the most primitive tools. How could they build such magnificent buildings? And nowadays, we can't build all these modern crappy buildings that look like animal cages with a statue of a turd in front from modern art, or another fake BS thing that comes from atheism. All right, and so what I'm saying is also, for example, look at India. Okay, I know some very nice, very smart doctors from India. Okay, but I've also seen this. When Indians become Christians, they seem to get more creative ability. Look at, for example, Dinesh D'Souza, brilliant guy, magnificent movies, all kinds of magnificent editorials and shows, all right? Look at Vishal Mangalwadi. He wrote the book that made your world, all about the effect of Christianity on India and on his own life and other great men. And there's been lots of other ones. And right now, to me, it's amazing. The two best candidates for president, they're both Indians, okay? Look at Dr. Shiva. That guy's a super genius, okay? He's awesome, okay? And this other guy, Vivek, I haven't studied him so much, but everything I've seen of him so far, I liked it. I don't know him that well. I haven't studied him. But every time I've seen a couple quotes and brief interviews of him, he's been very impressive. These guys remind me of the founding fathers, okay? They've impressed me more than Trump has. Trump is he's entertaining, but he had his 4 years and he didn't do that much. Okay, he's just he looks like Mr. Wonderful in comparison with the current guy, but he didn't fix the border. Okay, and he didn't fix a whole bunch of other things. So he certainly is entertaining, but that's not the same as doing good things for society. Okay, but yeah, he's a million times better than the current guy. Okay, so next, here's love is patient, love is kind. That comes from the book 1 Corinthians chapter 13 verses 1 through 13. I'm going to talk about that in a separate video, so I won't go into it now, but that's a beautiful passage that's written by St. Paul to the Corinthians to help them as they were establishing their church. Okay, the next one is from 1 Peter, the book 1 Peter chapter 4 verse 8. Okay, and it says, "Above all, love each other deeply, since love covers a multitude of sins." And what that means is if you basically care about each other and be nice to each other, you do the right thing. So let's say, you're a psychiatrist and the standard of care is to prescribe some stupid medicine that hurts the patient. It doesn't work. You should try to avoid prescribing that medication. For example, we know schizophrenia, they do better in residential care like Soteria than they do with these medications. Maybe in the acute phase, they need something to help them get through an acute psychotic episode. That's reasonable, but they certainly should be given a chance at something like Soteria. Okay, and the same applies for a lot of this other stuff. The kid has what seems like a so-called attention deficit. Why don't you try the Feingold diet on him? Why don't you try optimizing everything in his diet, his lifestyle, etc., and avoiding all these toxins? And maybe that'll be enough to cure him. Look at that Catherine Reed lady who cured her kid of autism by getting all the MSG out of the kid's diet. Okay, try that first before they stick the kid on some poisonous medication that's going to cause brain damage and make everything worse for them. Okay, so if you just care about a person, you'll do the right thing as best you can. And for example, why do I say, Big Pharma hates people? Because you have to hate people in order to poison them, okay? Most people that we don't know, we're just indifferent to them. If somebody said, "Hey, would you poison this stranger?" You would say, "No, I don't want to do that. That's cruel. I respect human life. I would not poison a stranger." Big Pharma says, "We can make money off this." Yes, do it. And then the big professor doctors at, all the Ivy League schools will go, "Oh, I can get grant money? Yeah, okay, I'll poison these stupid chumps." Because the attitude is they're a bunch of, talking primate, useless eaters, worthless people. So what if we poison them? We're making good money off it. We're getting prestige. We're getting promoted. That's why you have to have these Bible-based ethics or you always end up in shit, okay? If you don't have them, then man's life and mankind mean nothing, and there's no reason not to exploit them to make money, okay? It's just how it is. They're like a bunch of farm animals. That's why you have to have this. Believe me, I've been in all the highest ethics. I've trained at Harvard, I've trained at Northwestern, I've trained at Stanford, and I've got friends at all the other fancy places, and I can tell you, without these ethics, you're screwed. Human life means nothing, and the smart move is to just rip you off. And so that's why you have to have this, or you got nothing. And that's also why I like 1 Corinthians. He says, without love, you have nothing. You have to have that. So, anyways, I thought this was a little bit interesting.